We're back.
Back.
We're back. We're gonna actually take a moment with the next couple of podcasts and do what I would consider more of a educational situation. So we're gonna actually dive into what we consider the delivery methods of architecture slash construction. Um, so what we're gonna try to get across is what some of the core definitions are, and when I say core definitions, we're gonna be looking at our association, the AIA, which is the American Institute of Architects, what their definitions of delivery methods are.
Sure.
And with that being said, there's, I guess the meaning behind it. We're gonna touch briefly on that, and then we're gonna talk about what we've seen in the industry, maybe what some of the regional differences are, and then also from the definition, look at what maybe the reality of what happens when you are in the field and practical application. Would that be the right practical application of what is taking place, I guess, in the industry? And just to give some clarification on what this looks like, and a little bit about, a delivery method is like any industry, how that client is taking whatever situation is that they have, from wanting to build something, to facilitate something for their business, or whatever the case is, of how that is getting delivered through the process.
Sure. Start to finish.
Start to finish, right? Like what does that look like? Because I think a lot of times people don't understand, especially in the commercial world. People might have some, residential experience with building a house or putting up a garage, and that yes, it's somebody's delivering that product for them, but it's much different when you get into the commercial space and the regulatory environment and legalities and risk and all of this. It becomes a much more complicated thing. So that delivery has a particular process to it. And when I look at delivery, I'm thinking about we talk about our deliverables as an architectural firm, which might be the plans, the specifications, the oversight, how we deliver it. But really the delivery is creating whatever that client needs at that final position, which is the opening up of a building or an expansion or whatever it is. So,
And then the timing of when those different entities
Yes.
fold into the project.
exactly, and how the whole process goes through. So the delivery of the project, because as the design entity putting the plans and specifications and everything together, we're delivering something, but the ultimate delivery is the final product, which the contractor puts together. So, and I'll just kind of give a little bit of a baseline. Is typically in most all deliveries, there's the design part of it, there's the owner part of it, and then there's who's constructing it, and sometimes they overlap. So we're going to talk about that. The first one we're going to get into is we're going to get into what has been kind of the old standard, which I call it. I think even in the industry we call it that, is the design, bid, build. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to read what the AIA has for a basic understanding of what that means. And it's basically from, just reading off the paper here, the traditional method where the owner contracts separately with the designer, architect, and a contractor. The design is completed before bidding, and construction then begins after that. The process basically is architect design, owner decides to bid the project. That bid might look a couple different ways, but you're taking whatever that product is from the design professional, and you're finding contractors, subcontractors, everybody that's going to bid on that project, and then whatever that selected contractor is builds the project.
Right.
The contracts, which is kind of important. There's separate contracts between each entity. The owner has a contract with the design professional architect, and then the owner also has a contract directly with the contractor. And a little bit about the AIA, they kind of make the contracts so they kind of interweave themselves so that the contracts have an intermix of responsibilities, but it's clearly defined. And then the key features are, it's a linear sequence, clear separation between design and construction. Pretty basic, right?
Right. Yes.
So, from your experiences, Len, and from my experiences, and I would like to just, put it out there that, obviously you've been in this space from a project management, from an owner's rep standpoint, from a large facility standpoint. My background is from construction end, actually to change of career, and then actually starting out in my career in what we'll get into later is design build, and then coming into more of what I would consider a traditional architectural. So Nolan Carter as a firm, sign up here, is a very traditional architectural firm, and we've obviously worked with the design bid build process in the past. So that's the base definition that I would say, and let's kind of talk about what we see as some of the pros and cons with the design bid build, because ultimately I would say that there's no perfect situation, and you're going to have little nuances to each situation that might lean one way or the other. The other thing that, as we try to make this educational, we'll try to keep, our biases out of it, but there's going to be experiences that will come out of it. So I guess from that standpoint, Len, I mean, what is your idea of the design bid build delivery?
Yeah, right. I mean, like you kind of alluded to, any given project could go a few different paths. I mean, and then there's certain projects where it might make sense to do one method or the other. But as far as the core of the design bid build, like you said, we've definitely done that more often than not. I guess if you kind of ebb and flow, we've done some integrated we'll get into later. But yeah, getting that competitive bid, having the documents prepared that all the contractors are on a level playing field. They're all kind of putting their numbers up against the documents that we prepare. I think there's a level of comfort that the owners feel that there's everyone's kind of coming at it from the same perspective. There's really no advantage to one or the other. So I think from my experience, we've just seen like owners feel more comfortable that they're getting the best value, and there's nothing that they're getting shortchanged on. I guess is kind of my initial take.
Yeah, that the market is driving what eventually they're going to pay. And let's be fair, as consumers, you're looking at it as, hey, I'm spending a lot of money. I want to make sure that I'm getting the best value for what it is. Right. So I'm going to throw some little pitfalls in there, right, about that, right? Number one, documents better be right. Specifications better be right.
Absolutely.
It better be thorough, right? Because I will take the counter argument that maybe a contractor or a bidding person, right? Somebody, because it's not just the general contractor, subcontractor, it's suppliers, it's everybody that's going to look at that document. And one of the responsibilities of the design professional, and we can call it design professional or architect or whatever it is, but is basically to transfer the information of what has been gathered from the client in order to facilitate something down the end. We're like the bridge of information that has to go into a plan, right? That information has to flow through us, and ultimately the success of that project down the line has to depend on that documentation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to that point, a contractor or a subcontractor, their main goal when putting numbers together is to win the bid, to
To win the
win the project. So, they're gonna bid it according to plans and specs, like you
Yeah.
said. And, there may be an instance where, they know that they should have pricing included to account for this or that,
Yeah.
but it may not expressly say that in the plans or specs. So, are they really gonna put it in there, knowing that it probably will be needed later on in
Yeah.
the project? Or will they bid it, for the plans and specs, maybe at a lower number?
Yes.
And, do what they can to win the job, and then just assume there might be a change order opportunity down the road.
Sure.
So yeah,
Yeah.
definitely lives and dies by the quality of the documents.
Yeah.
Like I said.
And and you kind of touched on a couple of different things, and to be fair, we're gonna push through this pretty quickly and
Sure.
try to 30 minutes here, but we could probably talk, and maybe we'll even have follow-ups on the different delivery methods. But there's a lot of, like, you bring up a lot of good points in that process. There are checks and balances that go into it. I do think that if this is a delivery method that somebody's going to look at, you better know that the people that are putting that documentation together is good, because that's going to really set the stage of the success of what you're going to see down the road. So I think that there's a lot that has to be said. So if the plans are sloppy and don't have the information that it's needed. So if I was an owner looking on the outside, and say I was vetting out architectural firms, I would probably do a little research with contractors that have worked with them, ask them, what do their plans look like? If I'm
That's a
like some
great suggestion.
inside baseball,
Absolutely.
right? Who have they worked with, right? Because I think sometimes, and I'm speaking from the design professional end, right? I'm kind of talking against my own position, but in reality, if I was just an outsider looking to how do I start this process, yeah, I might look into somebody and say, from a contractor end, like whoever the contractor, like if you look up online and you find out that they did such and such a building, figure out who the contractor was and call them and say, how were their plans and specifications, and how was the process of working with this architectural firm
Yeah.
as the contractor,
Yeah, that's an interesting suggestion.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
This is kind of the first time I've actually thought about it.
Right.
But if I was to tell somebody and they weren't going to work with us how to mitigate some of their problems, talk to somebody, see if they're good at what they do.
That's right. Because
Ultimately that design professional, or let's just say that architect involved or that architectural firm, I will go to say this again, your value in what that person brings. So if it was me, I would not be shooting for the low cost leader architectural firm. Does that make sense?
It sure does.
Because exponentially down the road, if they do not perform their transfer of information, because let's cut to the crux of what they're doing. They can create beautiful buildings and all that, and there's art and everything into it, but they're transferring information to provide you with your end product. Better damn well make sure that they know what they're doing.
Well, sure, and I guess just to be clear and transparent, I mean, if we're putting, say, a number of hours that are involved in taking a project from like initial schematic all the way through construction documentation, I mean, it varies considerably by the
Yeah.
size and scope of the project, but say it's 10,000 square foot office building
Yeah.
or something of that scale, and whatever. Any just ballpark number of hours that might be involved through schematic, through construction documentation?
I typically know like the whole process because
Sure.
it's thousands.
Right,
It's
that's kind of
thousands.
where I'm
Yep.
going, like this
Like
is
through construction documentation might be, I don't know, maybe it's it depends on like a 10,000.
Totally.
I mean, but you're talking, yeah, it's a massive amount of time, and that's not even considering the construction oversight when we get into construction.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So maybe we don't assign a number to it, but
Yep.
the point being, it's hundreds and thousands
Yes.
of hours that
Yep.
are going into this. So no, you don't want the low cost performer that might
Yes.
just do the bare minimum.
Yeah.
Here are your plans, and then where does it get you on the bid then?
Yeah.
And with just
Yes,
some
because
misinformation, so.
and we've talked about it before, and this could be a regional thing or not. I would imagine it probably goes wherever you're at in the country, but your first run at the bid is your best run.
Right.
I tell clients all the time, if you run it and it hits the market, if you then come back and you haven't hit your mark from a budgetary standpoint, rerunning it, you're going to start to, I call it bidder fatigue.
Yes.
And it happens, and eventually subcontractor suppliers or whatever be like, well, I've looked at this 3 times, I don't care anymore, right? My number is still just my number.
I'm glad you brought that up, because you do say that often.
Your first shot is your best shot.
It is.
So if you're looking at that delivery method, you're going to want to make sure that your plans, everything is good, everything is right, and even from like a time standpoint, because a lot of people are really always concerned about time. Not all the time, but time can be a factor, and that rush can cost you a lot of money. So sometimes, keep at a moderate pace, get the information you need. But from an educational standpoint, it can have different, like we talked about time. That's where we get into different deliveries. If somebody is in just, I tell people, if you're in like a speedy rush, and what I talk to people in a basis of, if you have a widget factory and you just got a contract for 1 million more widgets, and you need 10,000 square feet of a warehouse to house your widgets, and you need it quick, well, time is your factor. And then what I say is, some of the risk or what you're doing as you're going through that process, if stuff gets missed, you're mitigating your risk, because every day you don't have your widget factory open for the 10,000 square feet you need, you're losing money. So whatever you may lose during the process of pushing it really fast, and that's actually a subset delivery method, is a fast track process, but we're not going to dilute this for that. But it's you're gonna lose some ground. But if you're, say, on a project, you're losing maybe, from a cost standpoint, because you're rushing through it so quick, say you're losing 1 or 2%, but every day that you're not open, you'd be losing 15 to 20, whatever. You got to do your math to make sure what it is. But if you have the time and you go through it, so from a design build, it's gotta be clear information. The other thing too that I look at it is, there's always been this understanding, and I'm going to go a little bit back in time, where there was this idea where design professionals, architects, engineers, whatever, were signing contracts a percentage of construction.
Yeah.
Right? So that's one thing that's came in that I think at one point in time gave architectural firms a bad name, and therefore our architects or design professionals over designing buildings from material selections and whatever else to inflate the
Design
cost.
elements,
Yeah,
sure.
inflate the cost of the project in order to receive a higher fee. Right? It's a theory. I actually knew an architect from out east that he did that. Now his argument with that was, well, as we're going through and the more complex you want me to do it, it is going to cost me more time. He had a theory. I can't really remember what the theory is, but he had a theory, and I was like, well, that's plausible. Like, maybe I can get there.
Okay.
At the end of the day, what I've said to clients is, if we don't cost effectively look at your budget and design to your budget, there is no project. I don't want any surprises. Our firm doesn't want any surprises that when we get to bid, that we're gonna overshoot and we're gonna have to go back to the drawing board. We try to, because we and hopefully most design professionals, and this is another thing, like if I was going to advise somebody, I would talk to the design professionals and I would say, well, how do you manage budget through the design process?
Right.
It's a good question.
It is.
And that gets into different stuff with integrated, we'll talk design build, all that kind of stuff. But typically what we look at, and I would assume that most firms, we're tracking and monitoring what the market is doing on projects. So we're keeping data at all times to understand what these costs should be as we go through, and hopefully we're we're keeping them balanced. Now, I will tell anybody, you, no matter what, are going to have risk when that thing finally hits the open market, because it's a moment in time, right? We could be talking to a client all day long, and you could get a governmental change in regulatory, or we got tariff stuff going on, and all of a sudden you have, like, one day it was here, the next day it's not there. That is a risk that's going to happen. No matter what, your project is going to find its value when it finally hits the market, and the market basically responds with how much your project is worth. But if you have a good design professional, they should be monitoring that as they go along.
Yeah, and I guess the one thing I was gonna say, when you talk about like our fee development, uh, you know, speaking about Nolan Carter, you
Yeah.
know, we really try to work through extensive programming
Yeah.
upfront to really understand what the design goals are, or maybe it runs on an hourly basis
Mm-hmm.
out of the gate until it is kind of more established and known, and then, like, you know, kind of the full package is
Exactly.
determined at that point,
Yeah.
once you really know, like, what the design entails.
Exactly.
And I don't think you want to be assigning like a full package fee before you really know what the project.
Yeah, you have to have
involves,
some terms, because it's about managing risk. And back to the percentage, right? Nobody that I know now, except for this guy out
Sure.
east, runs on a percentage of project. I think, like, you and I have talked, now with federal work possibly being in something, they do some of that, but in the private sector, that just doesn't really work.
Right.
Our clients, by the time we're going into full construction documentation, or even in the design development, mid-level stage, we're going to be talking to them about what our contract amount is. And to be fair, we're just looking at it from a volume of time. What do we think it's going to take to help them? And there's some risk on us, right? Because, if it takes longer or shorter or whatever, we've basically told the client that, to get you from here to there, this is what your cost is going to be. But again, I'm glad you brought that up. But it's thousands of hours.
Right.
Thousands of hours. So sometimes, and this is just a little side bias, sometimes when, professionals are talking to us, I'd like to kind of turn it around on them and be like, well, what if your company spent thousands of hours on one particular thing? How much would that cost you, right? I mean, and the other thing too is people have to understand, what is the value that you're getting, and that's why even earlier, do your investigation. If the value is, if you can make up value in having a firm that does really good work in construction documentation, it's probably a good value, because you're probably going to make up whatever that cost is later down the road. But the only thing is, you won't know it though. You don't see it. That's
Yeah,
kind of the
until
problem.
it's too late, maybe.
Until it's too late, right? And there's I think Abraham Lincoln or something had like a
Okay.
quote on, or I think it was Benjamin Franklin, the kind of like the sting of making decisions like that. Yeah, eventually might hit you, but you got to think about that. That it's not all. People should look at in terms of value and what that looks like down the road.
Sure.
I'm proud that a lot of times we have different situations where I know, and we know as a team, had it gone differently in a different situation, it would have gone very poorly for them. But, we do our job as we do our job. If you're only doing one building in your career for your business, you're not gonna know what the bad experience
Sure.
should be, hopefully.
Right.
Or we do get people that have real bad experiences and then come, and then we have to change that, I guess.
Yeah.
So, but
Let me ask you this. I think it'd be valuable for listeners to hear, and I think maybe we'll do this for every segment,
Yeah.
I guess, but, maybe what are some different industries, or what are some different project types where it either makes sense to follow the design bid build, or maybe it doesn't make sense, and it kind of lets you choose how you want to answer that, I guess.
yeah, I think it's a really good question. I would say, if you are a person where you're looking at something where design really matters, right? And when I say that, everything has design to it. I mean, if you're laying out a factory floor and you're putting pieces
Sure.
of equipment that need function and flow and you need clear space, whatever. I mean, that's design as well. But if you're looking at something where, you know, you want to put up a new building for your new bank branch, and you know what that looks like, and you want it to really be sharp and stand out, and you know, so on and so forth, you're probably going to want to make sure that you have a legit design professional
Sure.
that is there. Somebody that's going to work through and understand and be up to date on, you know, design elements, cutting edge materials, things like that. And then there's a trickle down to even understanding, you know, how the mechanicals work and the whole process of it. You know, there are certain situations too where I would say, you know, and we'll get into the other ones, like a um, a design build, right? I feel like a design build is a good delivery method when maybe that's not that important and you have to move fast, and there's potentially some level of like remodel uncovery that's going to go on during the process, and what I would say like small and messy sometimes,
Yeah.
if that's correct.
That makes sense.
You know, there's different places for it. Like I said before, like with the if you gotta move really really fast and you're not concerned with what you might be losing with the honing of the design,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe that makes sense
Yeah.
too.
Now, how about something that's highly technical? You know, maybe it's medical.
Mhm.
Maybe you know you're needing to interact with different state agencies, you know, DHS or things like that.
Yeah.
You know, if you have something ultra complex on that level, you know, touch on that.
Well, I think that in those instances, it's going to be really important that the design and everything
Right.
is very thought out. You're also going to get to like a cap size and complexity. I don't know why I couldn't say that, but of a project. So yes, when you get into a very complicated, highly regulated. So if we're talking about, you know, like legitimate hospital work,
Sure.
it can be highly regulated, highly complicated. You're gonna, because even in that instance, now you might not just be talking to or working with one architectural firm, but you might be talking to an architectural firm and then, you know, engineering firms, and maybe you might have like different technologically specific designers. I mean,
Sure.
it's going to be a whole group.
Specialty equipment.
Specialty equipment.
Yeah.
There's multiple levels, and we've done these where, yeah, the architectural firm might be kind of running different things as kind of the point, but you're going to have a lot of different specialty individuals involved in that. I mean, for instance, even from an HVAC standpoint, inside of one of these very large medical complexes, it's very complicated and very highly regulated, because you're talking about a vulnerable population, right? And that vulnerable population, sometimes that complexity and the regulations, I always, and if I go back to it as a design professional, or the license that goes along with, you know, our responsibility as a firm is health, welfare, and safety. So the more complicated or vulnerable that health, welfare, and safety is of human beings, the more highly regulated it is, and the more you're going to need a pretty top-notch design professional to take you through that. So in that instance, you know, the design bid build is probably
Sure.
very, and then again, we can talk about integrated. That's kind of a design bid build hybrid, but we'll kind of get into that later.
Well, any
Just kind of-
any
Yeah,
parting
go.
words on design bid build to kind of put a bow on
You know,
it, or-
we touched on a lot of different things there, but you know, for an educational standpoint, you know, the design bid build is is the process, there's a separation, right? And that's why, starting it off with the contracts, there's a separation between the two. The owner basically has a contract with the design professional, then they also have an owner contract with the contractor. It's traditional. Sometimes where we see it, and this is what I wanted to talk a little bit about, is, what is the reality of it? Sometimes it can be cumbersome, right? And I see that level of, I guess, cumbersome situations is when documentation isn't good.
Right.
The information isn't understood. And if, let's be fair, and I'm not trying to pick on contractors, but making sure you have the right contractor for the project, and you have a contractor that has been vetted and can produce the quality of project you're looking for, right? Because if you bid and you have, that's where, and we could get into more of this, but depending on how complex the project are, there could be bid bonds, which means that a construction company has to be to a certain level to be able to get bonded, to be able to even bid on the project. So as you go through the hierarchy of complexity, there are checks and balances to hopefully make sure that you're not having a contractor on a project that they're not suited for. But as we know, like just regionally around here, you gotta know who you're working with, because at the end of the day, the owner, architect, everybody can do everything that they wanna do, but if that contractor is ill-equipped to provide what they need to on site, so that's another very, very important piece, probably one of the most important pieces to this
I'm
puzzle.
glad you brought that up, and probably be my final comment on the whole design bid build is, our role, or one of the things that I do specifically is making sure that we have the right bidders bidding on the project, right? Making sure they're all qualified, pre-qualified, because that can definitely skew the whole process of the bid if you have, somebody that's not qualified to be bidding on this job.
Yes.
Right, and they're kind of just throwing a low number out there, see what happens, see if they get the job, but if we're doing our job up front and setting a good pool of prospective bidders, pre-qualifying them, make sure that, they're gonna be able to, complete the project, meet all the needs, timing, and all that kind of stuff. Really critical to have a successful design bid build is having the right people at the table and bidding on the job.
Yeah, and let's be fair, it's a lot of money. A lot of these projects are a lot of money,
Right.
and it's a very, we obviously see in the market that construction drives a lot of economics throughout the country, whether it's the supply of goods or services. I mean, it's something, besides supplies, it's hard to offshore construction, right? So, it's a big driver of our economy. There's a lot of money involved, and, you do get a lot of very aggressive different contractors out there. So that's another thing that, obviously in the separation of the different people is there's a check and balance. I try to tell people it's the three-legged stool,
Sure.
like at the purest form. There's a separation between them. But I will say something as a contradictory, where some people, I think, and ownerships have gotten irritated in the past. There can be infighting.
Okay.
Between the contractor and the design professional, because at times those are two different entities. They don't have a contract with each other. They have it
Right.
with the owner,
Right.
and you have the design professional and the contractor are looking at the project from two different positions, right? Like they say, to the contractor, they're just the hammer and nails, and then they're looking at managing their risk and their profits and their cost into it in a certain way, and then you have the design professional is looking out for the transfer of information, make sure that they're doing it properly, and looking out for, because the construction administration, as you brought up, is, kind of part of your world, where
Right.
you're also out there ensuring that the contractor is actually following the plans as we got them put together.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, owner advocacy is the way I always kind
Yeah.
of look at it, like,
Yeah.
we're there, we have the contract with the owner, we're
Yeah.
looking out for their best interests when, they may not know any better, if
Yes.
something's going astray,
Yeah.
that's kind of where we're there for oversight to kind of rein it back in.
Yeah. And again, we could go into all of that, but it is, and that's back channel stuff that's happening all the time. One of the things the owner doesn't know, and I would say, as a kind of a last thing to this, in any one of these delivery methods, make sure you feel comfortable as an owner or a person going into this, that you feel comfortable that there's a good faith and trust in the people that are going to be advocating for you. Not only the contractor, but the design professional, because like you said, to create that construction administration oversight process, you're looking out for the ownership best interest and what's going through there. So it's another thing, I guess, a pro kind of con. There can be some conflict, but the pro is, and we've had a lot of owners say this, like they would not want to do it any other way because they felt like, and they had this where they had somebody looking out for their best interest all the time when they were clueless to what was going on.
It's a good tension.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, and with that, we could probably go on a lot longer with it, but we'll kind of stop at that.
Good.